Good evening. This is MemphisWeather.net meteorologist Erik Proseus. It's about 9 p.m. on Monday evening, and wanted to talk a little bit about the winter storm that's going to be moving into the area on Wednesday. And hopefully this is our last gasp of winter, the closer, so to speak, putting an exclamation point and an end to this what's been a pretty rough 2 or 3 weeks here. The last half of February into early March, very, very cold temperatures. In fact, February has come in as the 7th coldest February on record, dating back to 1875 here in Memphis. The second half of February, from the 15th through the 28th, was actually the coldest second half of February ever recorded here in Memphis, and it blew the previous record out of the water by over 5 degrees. So definitely a very cold end of the month, and it looks like that's going right into the early part of March here. March coming in like a lion. Let's start off with some of the details for Wednesday, and all of this is, as it is only Monday evening, is subject to change. I'll mention that again, but any details we're discussing tonight could and very likely will change at some point, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of at least what to plan for here about we'll say 36 to 48 hours in advance of this storm coming in. So the setup on Wednesday is going to be basically a cold front that's going to move through the area during the morning hours, early morning hours in fact. We will be up into the 60s tomorrow out ahead of this system. Very warm air coming in on southerly flow out ahead of that. But this cold front is going to move through early on Wednesday morning, and it looks like by about 6 a.m. it's going to be positioned across North Mississippi and continuing to dive south. Now during the day we're going to have a couple of hazards to deal with. One of them is going to be the possibility of some freezing rain over the area. The other possibility is some heavy snow, and you see kind of where these intersect basically is right over the Memphis metro. Now this map doesn't really show it, but I think the biggest concern actually during this storm is going to be the possibility of some fairly significant amounts of sleet coming down. But we will get into the details here in just a minute. This is probably not a whole lot unlike the President's Day storm of February 15th, I believe, that kind of kicked off this whole string of winter weather that we've had. So if you remember back to that, now depending on where you were, it might be a little bit different, but the setup is somewhat similar. So the first thing we have to worry about, though, is going to be overnight, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. First thing we're going to be dealing with as these temperatures start to fall is heavy rainfall. This is the precipitation forecast from NOAA, the Weather Prediction Center, for the midnight to noon time frame. So this, I think, is going to be almost all before any precipitation starts to change over to wintry type. And we're looking here and seeing somewhere around an inch of precipitation rainfall during that period. I wouldn't be surprised to see some locally heavier amounts, and when you add in some of it that we're going to get actually before midnight tomorrow night, during the evening hours tomorrow, I think we could see some areas that get up to 2 inches of rain from say 6 p.m. on Tuesday until noon or so on Wednesday. Now during the period of frozen precipitation, and I think we're going to generally define that as around noon on Wednesday, some are going to experience that slightly differently. But around noon on Wednesday until midnight on Wednesday night, we're looking at precipitation totals generally in the 1 to 1.5 inch range, maybe up pretty close to 1.5 inches of liquid equivalent. That means that whatever falls out of the sky, if you were to melt it, would basically end up being about 1.5 inches of rainfall. When you change that into different types of precipitation, for instance sleet, that is basically the liquid amount can be doubled to tripled, in fact, to result in the amount of sleet that you'd expect. And for snowfall, generally around this area, it's about a 10-to-1 ratio, 9-to-1, 10-to-1, or somewhere in that area. So a 10-to-1 ratio would mean if it were all to fall as snow, this 1.5 inches of precipitation would be 15 inches of snow. Now that is not what we are forecasting. However, that's the amount of liquid that is going to be falling from the sky. So between that 1.5 inches and maybe the inch to 2 inches prior to that, we're going to have a fair amount of water coming out of the sky during the night, Tuesday night, and throughout the day, Wednesday. I want to take a look at the GFS computer model. This is the American model that actually I've been following pretty closely the last couple of days. I followed all the models pretty closely, but I like the resolution and the timing and so forth of the information that's coming out of this model as far as changing of precipitation types and amounts. So leaning kind of pretty heavily here on the GFS model. If that model turns out to be wrong, my forecast is going to be wrong as well. But we will start off with this to give you an idea of what I'm thinking about timing wise. And so this is noon on Wednesday from the GFS, and so the rainfall is the green, the pink is the freezing rain, the orange is the sleet, and the bluish colors are the snow. The 32-degree line is the red line that is going basically right across Shelby County and bisects the metro at noon. That would be the first time that we would expect to see some sort of winter precipitation. So before that, it would be all rain during the morning on Wednesday. Right now, it looks like around noon is when those temperatures will fall to the freezing point. In fact, they'll be falling throughout the morning hours from probably the mid-40s early Wednesday morning down to the low 30s by noon. Roughly, give or take a couple of hours. Again, we could be off by a couple of hours on this pretty easily. But that would be when we'd switch over to see freezing rain. And so that is what is depicted here in the pink. I think there is a brief period of freezing rain that we can expect across the metro right as the temperature falls to 32, and maybe for a couple of hours or so behind that. But it won't take very long for this sleet to push into the area. And that is because we're going to have the temperatures that are just above the surface also fall below the freezing mark. And so as the precipitation falls into that area, first of all, it's going to melt completely in a very warm layer in the mid-levels, say between about 5 and 10,000 feet. But then once it gets down into the sub-freezing layer below 4 or 5,000 feet, it's going to go through a refreezing process, and that would be what produces this sleet. And so that is what we're seeing here from the GFS model. At 6 p.m. on Wednesday, we are well into this area of sleet for just about all of the metro. The freezing line has moved down to a position south of the metro. The freezing rain has moved off to the south. We have sleet, and then the snow is kind of moving in towards the backside, and the snow will be what we would expect once that mid-level warm air cools off, and we have basically below freezing temperatures all the way through from the clouds to the ground. But it does look like probably a sleet scenario by late afternoon into early evening for certain here in the metro. Now this is for midnight, and you see that the snow is moving closer. I think that by midnight we probably will see some of this sleet mixing with or changing to snow. Maybe a little bit earlier than that. This is a little bit later than I'd seen earlier today, but I think the possibility exists that we'll be changing over to snow to end this event, and so that would be from late evening, say after about 10 o'clock or so, until the precipitation ends during the wee hours of the morning on Thursday. I believe that by the time we get up Thursday morning, the entire event is done. Precipitation should have ended, and we will see what we have on the ground. Again, these times are rough. They are not exact. They very likely will change between now and when the event actually occurs. So again, I think the predominant precipitation type for the majority of this event is going to be sleet, and it could be steady to occasionally heavy at times. It's going to come down pretty good if this pans out. As far as what the Weather Service is calling for, I'll show you this graphic. They have used this in a briefing that they did earlier today, and I think their thinking is very similar to mine. I think it's pretty much spot on, and I'll just highlight the area right here in the center along the I-40 corridor for the metro. I think we're going to see, just as they are, some significant sleet and some snow accumulations across the area. Light freezing rain or an early bout of freezing rain as the precipitation first changes over is possible as well, but I think our main scenario is going to be sleet and some snow. That is going to cause some problems for travel around the area, especially as we get into later in the day and into the overnight hours. So as far as the preliminary details then, at this time, 9 p.m. Monday, and potential impacts, I think we see rain changing to freezing rain about midday on Wednesday, and then in the early afternoon hours, probably within a couple of hours of it becoming freezing rain, we will transition over to all sleet, and then after dark on Wednesday night, probably into the late evening hours, we'll be switching over to snow. So we'll see the entire winter precipitation cake falling on the Mid-South on Wednesday. Heaviest rain is going to be during the night, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. And again, we could see some potential flooding in low-lying areas, especially with the amount of rainfall that's going to come down. I don't expect widespread flooding, but we certainly need to keep that potential there, something to consider as we head into the morning rush hour on Wednesday. As far as freezing rain is concerned, I think that we'll see probably anywhere from about 1/10 of an inch to 2/10 of an inch. This could change a little bit as well. It'll occur fairly briefly over couple hour period around midday, and that will put down could put down the initial glazing on some surfaces, especially those exposed surfaces. Bridges could start to get a little slick from this. It really doesn't take a whole lot of freezing rain to create slick bridges and overpasses. The things that we have going for us that may keep that from becoming a real problem, at least initially, is the warm temperatures up ahead of this system, and the fact that we'll have rain falling right before it. And so I think that some of this will wash off. We probably won't see that much freezing rain actually accumulating, but we could see about that amount of liquid falling out of the sky during the period of freezing rain. So I expect that we'll start to see some trouble with slick roads and stuff, maybe as early as midday Wednesday. I think the better chance of that is going to be as we go later into the afternoon, though, and we could be looking at as much of an inch or more of sleet during the afternoon and into the early evening hours. The afternoon rush hour on Wednesday I expect to be fairly treacherous. If it comes down, say, an inch to maybe even an inch and a half of sleet over a period of 4 to 6 hours, it's going to be coming down pretty steadily at times, and that will accumulate on basically just about all roadways, even those with traffic. Sleet is fairly difficult to melt and to tread in and so forth, and to have the tires warm it enough to melt. Generally, it just gets compacted, and so we actually saw that on the north side of Shelby County on that President's Day storm, where we had about an inch, a little more, an inch and a quarter of sleet, and it did cause roadways, secondary roadways especially, to really get iced over. So that could be a problem, definitely, by as we head towards dark on Wednesday. And then during the overnight hours, after dark into the overnight hours, right now I'm calling for 1 to 3 inches of snow. I think more snow is going to be likely to the north, up around Tipton County. It could be up closer to the high end of that. North Mississippi may be down to the low end of that, but that's one thing that we don't know for sure right now. And it's going to depend on the amount of precipitation that's still falling and what time that changes over. So we're going to be watching that pretty carefully. But right now, a 1 to 3 inch snow possibility is, it looks like something that could be possible. And that would just basically put a blanket over those icy areas and basically insulate it. So that could create some real problems as we head into Thursday morning. The other thing to consider here is going to be gusty winds. Looks like the winds are going to be up probably in the 15 to 25 mile per hour range, maybe a little bit higher in gusts during the day on Wednesday as this really cold air filters into the area and continues into Wednesday night. That is going to produce wind chill readings, especially by Thursday morning, that are going to be very, very chilly. And so we're going to want to keep a close eye on that as well. This would be a bigger problem for power outage and so forth if we had more freezing rain falling. I don't think there's going to be necessarily enough freezing rain to cause a bunch of power outages. Sleet does not stick to power lines, but the gusty wind is mainly going to be a problem for those wind chill readings. And then behind this system, we have another bitterly cold Arctic air system that moves in. Thursday and Friday, high pressure builds over. We are going to see some sun. Temperatures may get up close to freezing for highs on Thursday and Friday. So with that, with some traffic and some sunshine, I think the roads will start to improve, depending on how much falls and how compacted it gets and so forth. But this very cold Arctic air that in fact probably will get very close to setting record lows on Friday morning especially. We could see lower teens for lows with wind chills in the single digits. That will delay any melting and recovery from this system Thursday into Friday. The good news is it looks like it starts to warm up this weekend. We head towards a warmer pattern in general for the second week of March. So I think that we will start to see some definite warming this weekend that'll take care of a lot of this. But there are still some areas that have a little bit of sleet around in piles and shady areas from 2 weeks ago when this first storm hit. Definitely something to consider going forward with that. Just briefly, the winter weather preparedness tips. I won't go through all of these in details. We are under a winter storm watch right now. I expect a warning will be issued probably by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, if not during the mid-morning hours tomorrow. Things to keep in mind. I don't think power outages will be a great big deal, but certainly not a bad idea to make sure that you got your weather radios, general radio flashlights and so forth ready just in case. If you are not able to get out during the day Wednesday or Thursday perhaps as well because of the ice on the roads, it's good to have what you need in your pantries and so forth for a couple of days. Not a big concern, but again, good idea to have that stuff handy. Keep all of the necessary items as far as basic first aid, pet food. Take care of those pets. Take care of the young kids, the babies. Take care of the elderly. Just make sure you have all of that in place. And certainly make sure that you're following us for the latest weather information as well. We're going to keep you updated on Facebook and Twitter. We're MemphisWeather.net on Facebook, at MemphisWeather1 on Twitter. Know who your trusted sources are, have multiple sources of information, make sure that you're getting those multiple sources, and make the best decisions that you can by trusting those sources and keeping up with them. By this point, you know where you go for that information. We appreciate us being one of those. Thank you very much for that. But we certainly want you to pay attention to the other sources around town as well, particularly the local media sources, and certainly the National Weather Service here in Memphis. They are also on Facebook and Twitter and are providing briefings and so forth to give you that information. So with that, I think we'll end it for this evening. Appreciate you watching and tuning in, and we will have more information again tomorrow during the day Tuesday, and during the event on Wednesday we will keep you updated as it unfolds. Make sure that you send us your reports as the precipitation changes types and how much you have and what the roads are looking like and stuff, so we can forward that back out to those who are looking for that information from us. We greatly appreciate that. So for MemphisWeather.net, I am meteorologist Erik Proseus. Everyone have a good evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.